Last time we spoke, we were talking about the preparation for the Battle of the Somme. This was the English-French attack on the German trenches, 90 miles north of Paris in the Somme River Valley. Now, Douglas Haig made it a major component to his preparation for this attack, that they would start the attack, the offensive, on July 1st, 1916 at 7:30 in the morning. As you know, if you're awake at 7:30 in the morning on a beautiful July morning, it is bright daylight. Now, he has been criticized over the years, Haig, much maligned for his decision to try to surprise the Germans with a morning attack, a bright, broad daylight attack. Typically, offensives begin shrouded under semi-darkness or darkness, but Haig wants to begin this offensive at 7:30 in the morning. So 7 straight days of bombing. English artillery attacks on Germany, they subside, they go quiet. 7:20-ish, July 1st, 1916, there is a massive, huge kaboom at 7:20. 10 minutes early, the first of 17 mines or explosives placed under the German trenches goes up, right along a place called Hawthorne's Ridge. It was planted 75 miles beneath the surface, and it goes up 10 minutes early. It's known today as Hawthorne's Mine or even Hawthorne's Crater. It's famous for 2 reasons. One, because it was 10 minutes early for some reason, and secondly, it was just by happenstance accidentally caught by moving film for a film that was produced later on, referred to as the Battle of the Somme. So it's a major component visually to this documentary, Battle of the Somme. So at 7:20, we have a major explosion, and then 10 minutes later, 16 additional mines go up, and then the offensive is going to begin. Right on cue at 7:30, 60,000 members of the BEF, with some French assistance, go up and over the top and begin marching their way towards the German trenches. Now, I should mention to you a little bit of the attitude for England before the attack. The higher command, meaning the generals, lieutenants, the upper brass, were very, very strong in their message to their troops. Boys, this will be a walkthrough. This is going to be a cakewalk. The Germans are mostly dead over there. 6 days, 7 days of bombing. They're mostly dead. If they're not dead, perhaps they're wounded. It'll be a really, really easy day for you all. So don't be concerned. Now, we know today through primary sources that many of the younger comrades, members of the PALS battalion, the BEF, felt differently. There was an ominous undertone before the offensive began. You had men that were penning letters back home to small towns in England saying, "Mom, Dad, I love you. Today I likely die during this offensive. It's going to be a meat grinder, essentially. We're going to die." Other folks sent back letters to Mom and Dad adjusting their will. So there was this dark, ominous undertone before the battle began. Before discussing the actual attack on the German trenches, I should also mention a couple of things that maybe hindered the German offensive as they made their way across into no man's land. No man's land was wet. It was a soggy, wet period. It had been a wet season. So no man's land footing was going to be a problem for the English. Okay, so not very nimble on their feet. It was wet. It was soggy. They carried 66-pound packs. Imagine that. All the things they needed to prepare a meal while in the field, a change of clothes, pots and pans, 66-pound packs on their backs. So footing was going to be an issue here as they tried to attack Germany. I should also mention it's not a small area. 1.5 miles of no man's land separated the German and the English trenches. So it's quite a bit of a long walk carrying a heavy pack. A couple of things I should mention that maybe indicate that mentally, emotionally, the English were not ready for battle. As they made their way out into the trenches, they carried several items with them. Many troops were carrying shovels. Your first thought as well, were they going to, bury their dead? Were they going to re-dig the trenches? They were told to bring shovels over their shoulders to simply dig open graves graves for the German troops. There was a certain arrogance there from the high command. Take these shovels and bury the German dead when you get there. I should also mention that many of the troops carried over their shoulders, over their heads, 3-4 men at a time, these large enclosures made out of wood and barbed wire. These big enclosures being carried overhead to house German POWs who were still alive when they arrived across the trenches, across no man's land. I should also mention to you kind of a fun subpoint or subplot to this whole story is that as the PALs, or as the English, made their way across no man's land, they actually played a sport, the 1.5 miles towards German trenches. I'll give you about 5 seconds for yourselves to see if you can guess what would that sport be. You're thinking cricket, you're thinking badminton, you're thinking frisbee. Not sure that that was a sport yet, but maybe you guessed it, football or our version of soccer. These guys are booting a soccer ball back and forth across no man's land. It goes into a mortar hole, then pops up, and they boot it again. So maybe their mind was not quite where it ought to be on July 1st, 1916. And you guessed it, it was a meat grinder. It was a proverbial meat grinder. When the PALs reached the front area of the German trenches, the barbed wire was not cut. It was wide open. It was intact. And they see one by one machine gunners for Germany come out of the trenches and begin to fire a barrage of bullets at the English troops. What turns into the day that might be a cakewalk became a bloodbath. It became a horrific day that would live forever in English infamy. They reported back hours later for roll call, and for example, there was one regiment where there were 40 men in a regiment, and one man was there to say, hey, I'm still here. My brothers, my friends, my kin, they're all dead. So the Germans were still alive. They came out with their machine guns, point blank range, and mowed down the English. It becomes one of the disastrous days in the history of the English military. At the end of day one, we're going to see 20,000 fatalities, 58,000 casualties, which means prisoners of war, that means injuries and fatalities. But 20,000 men lose their lives day one at the Battle of the Somme. And pretty much now we're going to see the next couple of months into the summer of 1916, there's not a whole lot of inertia for either side, not much progress for either group. Back and forth, just a lot of stalemate, a lot of bloodshed, and again, the sheer idiocy of this war is going to reveal itself. A lot of death for no gain whatsoever. Later in the summer, the English, a little bit of a case of desperation, they're going to introduce, late summer 1916, just something new, like maybe the silver bullet that will give them the technological upper hand over the Germans. We're going to see 49 tanks roll to the front line on the English side. So the English, and by the way, typically we think about World War I and technology, it's usually the Germans at the forefront of technology and new inventions, but we see here that the tank first appears on the side of the British at the Battle of the Somme. 49 are going to make their way, sort of chugging along slowly towards the English camp. Only 17 made their way into no man's land. So along the way, some break down, there's flat tires, they're out of gas, they're defective. Only 17 tanks arrive and make their way out into no man's land, summer of 1916. Now initially, you can imagine the Germans were a little bit caught off guard by the visualization of these monstrosities. Like, hey, what is that technological beast here coming our way? Well, I'm not sure, fire on it. They would turn their artillery and fire towards the tanks, and oh shoot, I missed. Well, it's coming pretty slow, maybe turn back there again. Bam, oh, I missed again. Let's try a third time. The third time, it was a charm. Guys, understand that at the Battle of the Somme, The tanks rolled out into no man's land at a top speed of 1.5 miles an hour. So really the tanks are a little bit frightening at first, the Germans, but largely they made up what we would call target practice. So the tanks were perfected, they were made to be more effective later in the war, but at the Somme, all things have to begin somewhere. They were largely useless to the English at the Somme. We should mention here with the Battle of the Somme that it really doesn't lead to anything too productive for the English. That's a little bit of a exaggeration. During the course of what becomes 5 months of warfare along the Somme, we see that the English do gain 7 miles of land. Okay, so it's not, not all lost here. 7 miles of land gained by the British, however, combined 1.3 million fatalities. 1.3 million at the Battle of the Somme, combined French, English, German. So there's a lot of loss of life for a mere 7 miles of land. But again, it underscores the brutal reality and this level of idiocy when it comes to this great war, World War I. There were a few interesting anecdotes that I should mention that you might find interesting in regards to the Battle of the Somme. Some very famous people did appear. For example, J.R.R. Tolkien did appear at the Battle of the Somme, and throughout World War I, many of the images, the things that he saw, the brutality, the destructiveness in the trenches, the destruction, did become sort of the impetus and the basis for Middle-earth and Lord of the Rings. Another famous example that we should really mention right now is that, there's not a one day I could give you, but we'll say summer of 1916, an artillery shell is fired from England, and it's going to collapse a German trench across the German trench system. Within that trench system, there were 20 German soldiers. On that day, out of 20 Germans in that trench, 18 men died. So 18 out of 20 died. 2 Germans survived with minor injuries. I'm going to show you guys this picture here. And one of the men who survived the attack appears in this photograph. So this guy right here with the mustache does survive that attack. And I want you to ponder for a second, one, who it might be, but also think, if you think you know who it is, imagine how differently the 20th century would have looked, if not for the fact that Adolf Hitler, one of the two, and that man in the photograph, does survive that collapsed trench at the Battle of the Somme. Hitler and one other guy survive, and imagine the next 20, 30, 40 years, if not for that